Okay, I'm Katie. I'm a nurse practitioner at Mass General in our leukodystrophy clinic. And so today I'm going to share with you a project that was done last summer that we presented, I think, to the families last summer, but not to this group. And then our hope to, as a nursing group, to start a transitions kind of project in this coming year. And so this is really focusing on, I think, sometimes the missing voice in all of our strong efforts is, the actual kids who sometimes aren't at these meetings and aren't having their opinions expressed as much. And so these are just kind of the goals for this quick talk, why it's important for us to be focusing on the kids' education about their own diseases. And then the first project will be the one that was put together last summer. And then I'm going to briefly go over our hope to have this more formalized way of transitioning our kids into adult care. And I think that important thing to remember is that this is a transition of the focus of care. And so it is not necessary for them to change providers. It's just that the focus changes from a pediatric focus to a more adult focus. As we get better and better at treating leukodystrophy, our hope is obviously that more and more children will be entering into adulthood and will be taking more ownership for their own care. And so just as a reminder, there are so many kids that are impacted by these leukodystrophies, not just the patient who obviously wants to know more about their own disease in many cases, but children come with other children, either siblings or their classmates or friends. So there are lots of children that we need to help kind of teach in a responsible way about these leukodystrophies. Oops. And so last year, right before everything shut down for COVID, I presented to Anna and Jackie the idea of coming up with a kids companion where we would take the parent companions for the different CPGs and have a version that was written specifically for kids. And then, as luck would have it, I suddenly had a lot more time with my daughter in our house due to COVID. And so this became her project along with several of our patients. And so last summer, she and Grady, who's one of our patients who gave me permission to share this again this year, presented the work that they had done. And so this handout is now available on the website. And our hope is to eventually be able to have it printed. But we're just hoping to get a few more kids to share their stories. And so I'm just going to play now a quick clip of the two of them presenting this. And so this is just the table of contents. This is what's included in it right now. And it really focuses on the neurology care companion as opposed to all of the other CPGs.
Hi, I'm Sarah. Hi, I'm Green. Just for kids. This thing called leukodystrophy. What is leukodystrophy? First, we tell kids about what leukodystrophy is. You can see it here. We explain it with the telephone. Usually, the brain can make a super fast call to tell the body what to do. In leukodystrophy, the call is slowed down. We want to help kids know all the cool things their brain can do. So we made this diagram. We also made it so you can sound out how the words sound. Cerebellum. Cerebellum. Next, we want kids to know about genes. Genes cause leukodystrophy, just like they caused me to be a girl and Grady to be a boy. We want kids to remember there's nothing wrong how you are made. Your genes are part of what make you so special, and you are perfect just the way you are. Each chapter also has an activity page to help make sure we all understand. Plus, who Who doesn't love drawing?
Hi, my name is Grady. Here's some of my ELD stories.
Sorry, the sound on this one isn't very good, but this is where we hope to get more kids to share their story.
There are different kinds of medical tests. Kids with leukodystrophy have to have two comments. There are an EEG and MRI. It's okay to be nervous before your MRI, but trust me, it will all be okay. You will get an IV before the MRI. The nurses are so nice, and they will numb your arm so it won't hurt, and you don't even have to watch. It's really quick. We made a game to teach kids about different tools that help some kids with leukodystrophy. Do you know all of these?
Our friend Emily helped tell kids that seizures feel like. Then we added in some tips on what seizures are and what to do if you see someone having a seizure. That's called seizure first aid. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, so our hope is to expand on that. And I think that the natural kind of growth from teaching kids about their own disease is kind of the first step in helping to prepare them in their transition to having a more adult focused. And so for the last several years, there's been an increased awareness of the importance of having a more formal transition program where children with any chronic illness or even without illness are more formally transitioned into adult care, and in that taking responsibility for their own care. And one of the reasons for this is because that period of kind of your early 20s can be a time when a lot of patients are lost to follow-up and have more negative outcomes. And so GOT Transitions is a federal group that kind of lays out some templates and different ideas for how to go about creating some of this. And so just to give some brief history of the importance. So since 1993, there's been focus on this, and the Academy of Pediatrics has had several different statements on the importance of transitioning care and the many ways that that's important. And of course, for our patients, this can be a bit more complicated because we have children with different levels of developmental abilities. And so this can also become a complex kind of paperwork issue if a child needs, to have the parent take over guardianship. But for the purposes of this project, we're really focusing primarily on kids that can have a more active role in their own care as they get older. And again, our hope is that that's going to be more and more and more of these leukodystrophy patients. And so the last survey that was done to see how well we're doing was in 2016. And unfortunately, the results were that we were not necessarily doing the best job, and that many, many children were not having a more formalized transition plan. And because of this, we started to put some energy into it here at MGH. And so what we used was the program that is kind of laid out in that GOT Transitions website. And so you can see here, I was surprised when I first started looking into this, how early it's recommended to start talking about. And so this gives you the different timelines, and you can see that it should begin around age 12. And then the hope is that by the time children are in their mid-20s, they'll be fully transitioned to an adult kind of form of care. And so these are some of the goals that would need to go into that transition. And so what we've done so far is that we created a questionnaire for each of those age groups, and we focused primarily on ALD to begin with, because that's the population that our clinic sees the most, and we wanted to have a starting point. And then the workflow, and this unfortunately did get interrupted because we had started doing this right before COVID kind of made things shut down. And obviously with restrictions around how many patients or how many people can be in the room and remote and all this, it's kind of been put on the back burner, but we're hoping to start again. But the workflow was that we have a letter that explains to the families that we're going to be working on this transition and involving the child more and more in their own care. The child is given this questionnaire, and then we meet with them alone and go over it. And I would meet with them, go over it, and then come up with 1 to 2 goals. And this is just the very beginning of the form. And so the idea is that the 12 to 14-year-old form has the fewest questions. And then as it increased, the next levels had more and more questions. And I have to say that I was surprised at how much many of the teenagers said that they wanted to know more, and also how that there was a significant gap in how much they knew about their disease and understood their disease. Some of it may have been how some questions were worded. So for example, we used, do I know what Addison's disease was? And in a newer version, we changed that to be adrenal insufficiency or Addison's, because I think some people didn't know that word. But I think even from our limited experience in the handful of kids we started this, I was struck in by how much they wanted to do this. And they were actually quite open to the second part, which was after we went over this, we came up with 1 or 2 things that they could start to do. So an example of that might be that for a 16-year-old, they might help call in the request for their own refill. They might figure out how to access their medical chart, those kind of things. And so our hope is that if we can begin to do this, and one of the reasons we focused on ALD is that there is a problem where men can kind of fall off and stop having those routine MRIs of the brain, which can be very, very problematic. So our next steps, and we've been discussing this in the care coordinator group, is to try to pilot this out in multiple centers to see if we can, test it out outside of just Boston. And then we want to come up with a more formalized way. So there's been several articles published for transition to care in chronic illness, but it's primarily been in cancer, cystic fibrosis, and then congenital heart defects. There's some I saw more recently around autism, but I think that there's a real room for us to get ahead of this and to start to develop this now, so that as these kids grow up, we have can do a better job of keeping them, feeling a sense of empowerment around their own care. And then, of course, our other goal is to translate this to other leukodystrophies so that it is not just an ALD project.